Perhaps our most direct experience with the chemical chlorine is in the pool. But it's not just here. Chlorine is practically everywhere. In cars and plastics, paper processing and siding. And of course, everyone knows that it's used in the water purification process. The fact is, chlorine is one of the world's most useful chemicals. But it's toxic too. If you treat it carelessly, chlorine can hurt you.
When you get in trouble with chlorine, when you go take stuff for granted.
And that's when mistakes happen.
You know, it's a poison gas. I mean, there's no getting around that. It'll burn your skin, it'll burn your eyes, it'll take your breath.
I couldn't breathe very easily. I had a lot of coughing, my lungs hurt.
Comments like these indicate the importance of taking precautions around chlorine. This is chlorine. It is a toxic chemical that requires continuous care in order to keep it confined and out of the environment around us. At room temperature, it expands many times in volume. And as a gas, it is 2½ times as heavy as air. Not only is it toxic, but it is highly reactive to certain metals and liquids. Here with steel wool at elevated temperature. Fortunately, over the past 50 years, PPG Industries and the Chlorine Institute have worked out procedures for handling chlorine and procedures for protecting the people who use this versatile chemical. Being safe begins with having the proper equipment. For normal work situations, a long-sleeved shirt or jacket, gloves, and goggles protect skin and eyes. And an escape respirator should be carried at all times. Keep a self-contained breathing apparatus nearby for use in emergency situations. But the proper protective clothing and equipment is only the beginning. You must use the proper procedures from the moment chlorine arrives. The unloading of a chlorine tank car is a good example of the special care required. Because of the hazards of chlorine, federal regulations require that tank cars be stored and unloaded from a private railroad siding. When a car is spotted, chock the wheels. Set the handbrakes. Lock a switch or close a derail in place, at least 50 feet away. And place an approved warning sign at the derail or switch before the car is connected to the unloading piping. Before transferring chlorine, pressure test the unloading connections. Then introduce a small amount of chlorine and test with strong ammonia water. If you see white vapors, you have a leak. Even minor leaks must be dealt with immediately, or they will get worse. When you finish unloading chlorine, immediately seal both the chlorine unloading lines and the gas padding lines to prevent moisture pickup. Reverse placards to indicate that the car has been unloaded before returning tank cars to your supplier. Prior to every loading, PPG evacuates the tank car, inspects all valves, replacing them at least every 4th trip or 6 months. And inspects the car internally. To ensure the car is still safe to load and to comply with DOT regulations, PPG hydrostatically tests each car every 2 years. Cylinders and ton containers should be stored separately in appropriately designated areas. Keep them away from radiators, steam lines, or other heat sources. This is important to remember, because the chlorine you receive is under pressure. To squeeze it into less space for shipment, chlorine is compressed and cooled into a liquid. It is then loaded into pressure containers to keep it from re-vaporizing. When tank cars, ton containers, or cylinders are loaded, room is always left to allow for liquid expansion. Tank cars, for example, are never loaded beyond 84% full. As the temperature rises, the liquid chlorine expands and the vapor pressure rises, which increases pressure against the vessel. Since the container is only partially full, there is room for expansion within a normal temperature range. If the container were liquid full, however, even a slight rise in temperature would cause pressures to rise so high that the container might fail. But there is protection. Tank cars are equipped with safety relief valves. And cylinders and ton containers have a built-in safety device called a fusible plug. This lab demonstration shows how excessive heat, in this case 158 degrees Fahrenheit, melts the plug. This releases chlorine gas into the air, relieving the pressure on the container. Although fusible plugs prevent ruptures, they can result in unintentional releases of chlorine from containers. Remember, chlorine gas is more than twice as heavy as air. Thus, it's important to avoid storing or using chlorine near elevator shafts and low-lying areas such as basements and pump pits where leaking chlorine would tend to settle. Make sure buildings are well ventilated, with exhaust fans close to the floor and air intakes near the ceiling. To use chlorine, you must transfer it from its container to your system. Every time you connect or disconnect piping, be careful of moisture. When chlorine mixes with water, a powerful acid forms which corrodes some common metals such as steel. In your system, this corrosion eats up piping, valves, and instruments. In some cases, the corrosive deposits will clog the system. So when chlorine is being used to treat water, care should be taken to have some built-in protection like a barometric leg. The leg is simply an inverted U-pipe that is tall enough to prevent liquid from being sucked back into chlorine lines. If moisture does get into the system and deposits build up, the piping must be cleaned with large amounts of hot water. Then with steam. And finally purged with dry air. Test the piping with a dew point meter until the air is dry enough to reach a dew point of minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Finally, seal the piping immediately. Keep all piping sealed whenever it is disconnected, even for short periods. The fitting and sealing of pipes often require the use of lubricants, but special lubricants are required. PPG uses a high-density silicon or Teflon paste, or Floralube. Apply it sparingly to male threads only. Do not use oil-based lubricants, since they can react with chlorine to form gummy residues that can clog systems. Oil, grease, and other hydrocarbons in contact with chlorine can create even more serious problems, as this turpentine-soaked rag dipped into chlorine shows. To prevent such reactions with chlorine in new or reconditioned pipes or valves, flush out all traces of oil with an appropriate chlorinated solvent, such as triethane. Then purge with dry air or inert gas. When using liquid chlorine, connect to the liquid valve, the bottom one on a ton container. Never hook the containers together in a common manifold. Called double manifolding, this dangerous practice can allow the chlorine to flow from one of the containers back into the other, causing it to become liquid full. Then even a small increase in temperature could lead to a bulge or even a rupture, resulting in a chlorine leak. Where liquid chlorine can be trapped in piping between closed valves, expansion chambers should allow for at least a 20% increase in volume. Otherwise, expanding chlorine could blow a flange gasket, rupture a valve or fitting, and escape into the air. Overheating of pipes can lead to violent reactions too. This hot steel rod shows what happens when chlorine gas is introduced into a hot pipe. Such reactions are most likely to occur after welding. So before welding, check the line for residue, clean it with hot water or steam, and purge it with dry air. Finally, test it with a gas meter for combustibles. After welding, the pipes must cool before carrying chlorine. For insulated pipes, be sure to allow plenty of extra time for cooling. These routine precautions in storing and handling chlorine, along with regular inspections, will protect your equipment and help you keep chlorine safely contained. But suppose there is a leak and chlorine does escape. Its pungent odor will alert you immediately. What do you do to protect yourself? The first thing you should do is put on a single or dual cartridge mask, or use a pocket escape respirator. A general service mask provides even more protection. No matter what type of breathing protection you use, if you smell chlorine, leave the contaminated area immediately. When you're outside, check wind socks for the wind direction. If you're downwind from the chlorine release, move crosswind. Once you and your fellow workers are safe, steps should be taken to stop the leak. If no one is trained to deal with a leak, Chemtrek's toll-free number will connect you with an industry-wide emergency response team, where expert help is immediately available by phone. If more than telephone advice is needed to solve the problem, an emergency team can be dispatched to your site. The repair person must wear a self-contained breathing apparatus approved by the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. Using one of 3 kits, leaks can usually be capped in valves. In sidewalls, or in fusible plugs. In case a container leak cannot be sealed, the leaking gas must be transferred to another container or neutralized in a caustic soda solution. For full absorption, neutralize by piping the chlorine to the bottom of the caustic soda. Never use water. Most of the chlorine passes right through water and into the atmosphere, but caustic soda absorbs and neutralizes the chlorine. Never apply water to a leaking container. Corrosive acids will form and only make the leak worse. Safety in the storage and transferring of chlorine and in emergency situations is really a matter of carefully worked out procedures. Take the time and make the effort to learn them so you and your fellow workers can stay safe on and off the job. These detailed procedures are easier to learn if you remember 3 general rules for handling chlorine that are in turn based on chlorine's characteristics. First, chlorine is a toxic chemical, so keep it confined and stored in a safe, well-marked place. Second, chlorine is highly reactive. Take care to avoid reaction with moisture, oil or grease, and hot metal. Third, increases in temperature increase the pressure of liquid chlorine on containers and piping and heighten the risk of ruptures and leaks. So keep containers and piping from getting overheated or liquid full. PPG is one of the largest chlorine producers in the country, And our Lake Charles production facility is among the biggest in the world.
Today's safety topic will be emergency breathing equipment. The first
We
item
work
we'll be
with our
discussing is the
customers
Scott
to
Air
design safe systems and to train personnel in how to handle chlorine.
by putting your hand over the hose at the bottom and breathing
But the
in.
success of systems and training depends on you.
Mask should
Once I learned how chlorine is supposed to be handled, I realized that it's a pretty safe chemical to use if you know what you're doing.
It usually takes a little extra time to take care of chlorine-related problems, but it's worth it in the end. Once you learn the right habits of working with chlorine, it makes working with it a lot safer for you and other people in your environment.
The safe handling of chlorine is up to you. Your safety and the safety of others is in your hands. With chlorine, it's always safety first.